Susan Hamwi was a 38-year-old divorcee who was discovered murdered in a Fort Lauderdale, Florida home on the 8th of November 1983 after a friend called the police, claiming to not have heard from her for several days. She had been sexually molested, strangled with a telephone cord, and stabbed to death with a carving knife. Tragically, with Susan deceased, her 18-month-old daughter Shane died of neglect. 2 pieces of crucial evidence were found at the scene: a bloody carving knife and red human hair. The following day, they questioned Susan's 66-year-old neighbour, Emma Jo Bartlett, and her 42-year-old schizophrenic son, John Purvis. John had red hair, so police considered him a possible person of interest. Emma came to the police station with him, but was not allowed in the interrogation room. The detectives did not know that he was schizophrenic. After questioning him, Emma came in and told them to stop the interrogation. However, the police were determined to question him alone. 4 weeks later, psychiatrist Joel Klass was brought into the station to administer a personality test using TAT cards. The cards include ambiguous drawings that require interpretation. One of the cards brought about an unusual response. John asked Joel if he would have to go to jail or could he go to the hospital instead. He also kept asking, "Do you think I did it?" He also confessed to killing her for refusing his sexual advances. He also confessed to the police officers. However, John claimed that the detectives told him that he would not be allowed to leave unless he confessed. John was then arrested and charged with the murders. At the trial, only the confession to Klass was allowed into evidence. Despite the fact that the confession did not match the crime scene and that the hairs at the scene did not belong to John, he was still convicted of the murders. He was sentenced to life in prison. John claimed that he was innocent and begged for the case not to be closed without finding Susan's real killer. In 1987, a new defence attorney was assigned to John's case. In the spring of 1992, he contacted Unsolved Mysteries, and the case was aired on the 13th of March 1993. Not long after it was aired, police reopened their investigation into the murders. They focused on Susan's ex-husband, Paul Hamwi, who was a wealthy real estate developer in Aspen, Colorado. At the time of the murder, he was in Aspen, recovering from a broken leg. In the summer of 1992, police followed up on a tip they had received back in 1985. The information led police to a man named Robert Beckett. He was in poor health, believed that he was dying, and had a heart bypass operation. He agreed to tell police what happened in exchange for immunity. Beckett claimed that he had an accomplice, Paul Sirio, and had been paid $14,000 to murder Susan. The man who hired them was Paul Hamwi, and the motive was to avoid paying $180,000 in alimony. Beckett claimed that he and Sirio travelled to Florida on the 31st of October 1983. The next day, they went to Susan's home. She let Beckett in because she had met him before. Once inside, he attacked Susan and killed her. He and Sirio then staged the scene to make it look like a robbery. Investigators recorded phone conversations between Beckett and Sirio in which they discussed the crime in detail. They also recorded conversations between Beckett and Hamwi. In January of 1993, Hamwi and Sirio were arrested and charged with the murders. After serving 10 years in prison, John Purvis was finally released. He was officially exonerated at a formal hearing on the 24th of February 1993. He has since been reunited with his mother and the rest of his family. Sirio and Hamwi were both sentenced to life in prison. Sirio died in 2004, while Beckett, who was given immunity for his testimony, was later convicted of an unrelated murder. $1 million was awarded in compensation for John's wrongful imprisonment. When Jenny Pratt was a 16-year-old student, she had hopes of becoming a model. She was pretty, well-liked, and in love with her boyfriend Curtis Croft. He drove a Porsche, had plenty of money, and was a Californian surfer. She did not tell her parents about him for several months. She told them that he was 17, and they felt at first that he was a very nice person. Only later did they learn that he'd spent time in jail on drug charges and was actually 24 years of age. On the night of the 25th of April 1987, against her parents' wishes, she went out with Curtis. They rode on his friend's motorbike. That night, he promised to get her home before her midnight curfew. However, just minutes before they arrived at her house, she was struck in the back of the head by a tossed wooden plank by the riders of a pickup truck that drove past them at a stoplight. At 1 a.m. on that night, Jenny's parents learned that she'd been attacked and was being airlifted to the Scripps Medical Center in La Jolla, California. They didn't understand why she was being taken there because there's another hospital just 5 minutes away. Only when they got there did they realise the gravity of the situation. Scripps, being a trauma centre, only took the most serious of patients. The doctor told them that she was brain dead. He feared that she may not survive that night. The blow she received to the head was great enough to crush her skull. This caused an immediate shutdown of her brain. Miraculously, Jenny survived the brutal attack, but she lapsed into a coma. Meanwhile, authorities began an investigation into the matter. The only physical evidence at the scene was a plank of wood with her blood on it. Curtis was questioned by the police. He told them they were at the intersection, about to make a left turn, when Jenny was struck with the plank. He saw the pickup truck drive by them, with several rowdy youths in its bed. Authorities thought that the case would have quickly been solved, due to the fact that the perpetrators were teenagers that would probably brag about the crime. Despite this, no one ever came forward with knowledge of the attack. Jenny's parents hired a private investigator, Louis Crisafi, to look into the case. He interviewed students at a school who stated that Curtis was the target of the attack, not her. In 1985, Curtis had been convicted of dealing in cocaine. After cooperating with investigators, he served less than half of his original sentence. He was soon perceived as a snitch and was disliked by other drug users. Authorities questioned people who may have had a grudge against him. They learned that he had confronted one of them on the night before the attack. Jenny's parents believe that one of them may have been behind it. The police investigation stalled when Curtis claimed that he could not identify any of the attackers. He said that the pickup truck was travelling at 55 miles per hour, which was way too fast for him to see them. Crisafi didn't believe him, so he created a reenactment with dummies to determine if his story was true. It showed that at 55 miles per hour, the plank would have probably killed them both. Also, it fell more than 50 feet from the scene of the crime, when in reality, it was found just a few feet next to the motorcycle. When they tested the truck travelling at 10 miles per hour, the plank inflicted injuries that was similar to what Jenny actually received, and the plank landed right beside the motorcycle, indicating that Curtis had lied. Crisafi believed that Curtis had seen the attackers. He confronted him about the discrepancies in his story. Finally, he named some people that he saw on the pickup truck. One of them was the same young man that fought with him the night before the attack. However, he later recanted his statements. He claimed that he was pressured and forced into naming names. He claimed that he'd also taken lie detector tests and always cooperated in the case. Jenny's parents believed that people were threatened into silence. They claimed that people were first willing to talk, but later refused to say what they knew. 3 months after the attack, Jenny awoke from her coma. 12 weeks later, she began physical therapy. 7 months later, she began to speak, and then a year later, she began to walk. Although she has progressed well, her brain damage is severe and probably irreversible. She has no memory of the attack and hopes that someone will come forward to help solve her case. The case was first aired on Unsolved Mysteries on the 14th of December 1988. An update, including interviews with Jenny and her parents, was featured in the 3rd anniversary. A walkathon in Los Angeles was organised to raise money to pay for the cost of her rehabilitation. In 1989, her condition improved and she returned to high school. Sadly, the statute of limitations had run out on her case. Several people close to it have claimed to know the identities of her attackers. They claim that the driver is still alive, but the person who threw the plank committed suicide in 1994. According to another witness, the attack was done on the orders of a man whom Curtis had ratted to the police. They've never been publicly identified.